Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Brown Overboard. I'm your host, Josh Bam Bam Brown, sitting down with you tonight, and I thought I would talk a little bit about the reality of reality TV. There are a lot of aspects of working in reality television that you're probably somewhat familiar with, and I'm sure there are a lot of aspects of reality TV that you're not. There are things that you might not realize or know unless you've been in that world and had that experience. Now, I cannot speak for anyone else's experience in reality television. I can only speak for my own. I can only talk about the things that I have personally experienced and the things that have transpired during our time in reality television. And for us, our experience, my experience in reality TV has been very genuine. It's been very honest and very genuine and very much just documenting our life and the way that we live. And for the most part, it was very easy to just go about our daily life as if the cameras weren't there for us to just do what we would have done anyway. One of the strangest aspects, actually, of cameras following you around was that every now and then they would come up to you and stop you from doing what you were doing and ask you to explain what you were doing or talk about what you were doing. And that is referred to as, there are two versions of what they call an OTF, which is where you stop and give a little bit of an interview. One is when you're actually in the middle of doing what you're doing. Like if I were here and I'm nailing a board to the wall and I'm constructing something, and while I'm doing that, they would come up with the camera and ask me to say what I was doing and explain it. And then the other version of what they call an OTF is a little bit of more just a standing interview that is done in the moment while you're doing what you're doing. So I would get through, let's say I got through nailing that board to the wall, and then I would go and I would stand there while they would come up with the camera and ask me questions about what had just transpired. And those moments and those kinds of interviews usually happened when something had just happened, when something had just either gone wrong or gone very right, or plans had changed, or there was something going on that needed further illustration. Like, let's say that a couple of us just got in an argument, or someone just dropped a tree on my head. You might have to stop in that moment, and a producer would come up with the camera and be like, God, can we talk about that for a second? How did that make you feel? And then you go into, talking about it and whatnot. And then there are the sit-down interviews, which come a little bit later. Those are the interviews where you're actually sitting down talking about the things that transpired and going over it in a little bit more detail. In one way, those interviews are weird because it's very much, spotlight on you. It's very much like in your face, right? And you're being asked all these questions. It was never too much of a problem for me. My biggest problems, and I've said this before, was that I either have a habit of giving one-word answers about things. I'm either the person that says, like they ask how hard something was, and I was like, very, very hard. That was very hard, difficult. Or I'm the person that is like a character written by Tarantino, and I have a tendency to meander around a little while and go back and forth and then over here and then back over here and then eventually get to my point. Now, I generally always have a point that I get back to, but it may take a little while to get there. The journey, I think, is the fun part with that. And I always do have a destination that we're eventually going to find ourselves at. But when doing sit-down interviews like that, you got to be a little bit more concise. You have to bring it in a little bit. You got to give more than a one-word or two-word answer, more than a single syllable. But you also cannot go on like a soliloquy. You can't just keep going and going. So you have to be, there's a certain way to kind of do it. And you get more used to that as the years go, and as not just the years but the interviews. The more that you do it, like anything, the easier it gets to do and recollect what you're doing and understand how to convey the things in a concise, intelligent manner that gets your point across. At least I think I got better at doing it. There are other things that go into reality TV, like just logistically, because it's a lot of times it's difficult to logistically do what you need to do. Like for instance, we've been asked a lot of times, and there have been a lot of people that have talked about whether or not we stayed in hotels. And the truth of that is, yes, we did stay in hotels. Did we live in a hotel? No. Did we stay in a hotel? Yes. Who hasn't stayed in a hotel? There are multiple reasons why we might stay in a hotel. Let's say that you go to town and you want to take a regular shower instead of bathing in the creek, and you're going to drop your clothes in an actual laundromat and wash everything you own real quickly instead of washing it in a creek. And you're going to do all this all day, and you're going to go shopping, and you're going to buy the tools and supplies that you need, and you're going to buy your beans, sugar, and bullets, and you're going to get everything together. And you might not feel like jumping on the boat and heading back home that same day, because also this is not a trip to the grocery store. We're not swinging down to the 7-Eleven and then going right back to where we came from, right back to our house. This is not down the block. Like it's a much bigger deal when you have to travel from where you are by boat. You got to skiff to the boat, and you got to pull the anchor and start up the boat and take the boat into town and then dock the boat and then go do everything that you're supposed to do and then head out. And sometimes you don't want to spend the night on the boat. Sometimes you want to go have a nice night at a hotel and be able to take 45 showers in one day, because that's something that a lot of people that haven't lived that lifestyle just don't realize, and they take it for granted. Like, I'm sure that the majority of people listening to my voice right now, if you wanted to, could just go take a hot shower. And that has not always been an option, and is not always an option for some of the people that are probably listening to my voice right now. And there are definitely some people listening to my voice right now that know what I'm talking about. So having the option to go take a nice hot shower is always fun. And spending a couple nights in a hotel while you're in town, or just spending the night in a hotel, is fun too. You get to go in, you get to watch a little bit of TV, you get to take some showers, and then you head back out to the bush. And then there were several instances of like Noah wanting to do stuff at the dump, right? And of course, the film crew wanted to film that, and we have very early start times because there's not a lot of light in Alaska. And in the time period that we were filming, there was only so much daylight, right? So we had to kind of start with the sun. You started at sunup, right? Because also when you're filming, there's logistical things of them having to put batteries in the cameras. They're having to put a microphone on you. They have to get the camera people in place before you can go do what you need to do. We're like, just let us at them. And they're like, no, let our camera guys get in there first because we want to film you doing this, right? So there are logistical aspects like that that are time consuming. And that's something you might not realize. That's another reality of reality television, is that it is time consuming. There are setups and there are nuances to these things. Even if you're just going to go in and be filmed doing what you're doing, they got to get the cameras rolling and up and going and sound hooked up to you so that people can hear you talking and everything else. So to do a lot of those things, we had to go to town, spend the night, and then do it in the morning, right? So you would go to town. And also, if we're splitting up, we only had the one boat, then we're not going to leave everybody stranded at Browntown without the boat. So like a few times, myself and whoever else was doing stuff in town would ride in with the crew on their boat and spend the night at a hotel, and then in the morning do our thing and go around town. And we get to play in the junkyard and do all those things. And they would film us doing all this. And then we would most likely head back to the island, or we would spend the night in the hotel and head back with the crew in the morning, since they were going back there anyway. And then there were other times where we just brought the boat in and we were doing our town stuff, and we stayed at the harbor in the boat because we had a boat in the harbor. But I was never one to turn down a night in a hotel and a hot shower, and neither really was anybody else. No, there were many times, though, we didn't feel like doing that. We're like, nah, let's just stay on the boat. I don't want to have to deal with the hotel and the people and all that stuff. So there's just nuances to that. And then the other thing as well with something like that is, so when you exist in the world, there are always going to be individuals that like you, individuals that don't like you, and the majority of people are just going to be indifferent to your existence. That's going to be the majority of people. Now, that's for everyone that's ever lived, ever will live, or is living now. But those kinds of things are very personified and amplified when you exist in front of the curtain. Because you can live your life behind the curtain, like most people do, or you can live your life in front of the curtain. like we have chosen to do, and like a lot of people choose to do. And whether you are an internet influencer, somebody that just puts a little bit of their life online, or you're somebody that is movie star status, that still counts as being in front of the curtain. And if you're in front of the curtain, you could more easily unmilk a cow than put that back. You can't get back behind the curtain. Once you step out, you're there. And with us and with our show, it jumped up really fast. It went from basically nobody having any idea who we were to being very out there very quickly, right? And the thing is that it just gets very personified when you're out there like that, how people look at you, how many people are talking about you. And there are going to be people that are like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I love this. I love what these people stand for. Family, faith, freedom. You know, this is great. You'll look at these crazy guys out there living their life on their own terms. And then you're going to have some people that, for whatever reason, whether they just have a miserable life and they want to make everybody else miserable, or whether they're jealous of how you are and how you live, or that you're on TV, or that you have the gumption to put yourself out there in whatever way, or any of those things, there are always going to be people that want to like bring you down. There are always going to be people that hate you for some reason. And again, that's amplified when you exist in front of the curtain, when you're not behind the curtain. So if you're seen going in and out of a hotel even one time, if you want to go to town and you want to watch some TV and you want to spend the night in an air-conditioned hotel room, and you want to have 20 baths in one night because you can, because there's running hot water, and somebody sees you going to and fro, and they're a person that already doesn't like you, then it's very easy for them to go, oh, these people are so fake. They're living in a hotel in town. I saw them there once. And that's just the way it is, and there's nothing you can do about that. Now, I myself have never cared what anyone thought of me. I think that's one reason why I have no problem with being in the public eye, no problem being in front of the curtain. I've never been somebody that really blends in. You know, my parents taught me my whole life, don't try to blend in, don't try to stand out, just be you, be real, be who you are. And that's how I've always lived my life. And myself, I believe in two things above everything else: freedom and personal responsibility. And I think that if you take personal responsibility for everything that you think, say, and do, then you should be able to live your life any way that you see fit, provided that no one else gets hurt. And you don't negate someone else's freedom to live their life the way they want to. And that's the bush life. That is life in the bush. And there were so many people that were just really enthusiastic about the show and about what we were doing. And so that's another thing that is a reality of reality television, is the way that it changes how you interact with the world, how the world interacts with you, how everything transpires in your life gets very different. It gets a little bit different. Very different and a little bit different, because there are nuances to the way that it's different, and then there's some stuff that is just overtly very different. But for the vast majority of everything that has transpired since we started doing the show has been overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And it's really cool just how many people enjoy being honorary members of the Wolfpack, and how many people enjoy being part of all of our crazy misadventures. You know, we had a difficult time even realizing why people would want to watch us on TV and would want to do that, because for us, it was just our daily life. Just our daily life. Like, an interesting thing that we got asked a lot, like at the start of every season and at multiple times throughout filming the show, we would get asked, so what's something that you do differently than other people? What's something that is strange about the way you would do something versus someone else? And we were never able to answer that question. We could never answer that. Who can answer that? Because again, my perspective is only from my perspective. So to me, even if it's something that I do that is different than other people, or strange or unusual or whatever, I don't know that because it's just the way that I do things. So when it came to my family, it's just the way that we lived. It was just our life. And so it's difficult for us to point that stuff out. And then we'd be doing something and we would do it like a weird way. And all of a sudden, one of the producers would jump up and be like, that thing, you're doing that thing. Explain what this thing is because nobody else does this thing this way. And so that was always interesting. That was interesting. And there were some people that took part in the show, and there were some people that really shied away from it. Like there'd be some places where like, oh, I want to do this thing or I want to go here, but because our whole life was being documented, it had to be involved in the show, and the people were like, no, thank you, and so you couldn't do that thing. And then there were other people that were like, yeah, I'll totally do it. In the way of some people were like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to be part of this, and then other people were just totally indifferent to it, and they're like, whatever, I don't care if there's a camera there. So you'd get a lot of those differences in that way. And I remember another thing, we had to take part in the safety meetings. Kind of interesting, right? Like we had to take part in the safety meetings, even though we could have been giving the safety meetings. And I might have talked about this on my last episode, my last solo one, because I was going over a lot of the different safety things. But it was just something that I was thinking about as I'm talking, because it was very interesting. And then there are nuances, like when you're in the safety meeting, hearing them talk about the things that they're warning people of that like you don't, realize that needs to be taught because it's something that's so ingrained in you. It's something that you are so used to. Like them being told not to look away from a falling tree, not to stand under a tree that's being cut down, watch out for chainsaws, that kind of thing, because that's just an obvious way of behaving in that environment for us. It's just a very obvious thing that you're supposed to do. And there's, I guess, a lot of nuances in that way that there's just daily life for us and things you don't realize that needs to be gone over. And I definitely appreciated the fact that they did that, and all the safety people always took things very, very seriously, very seriously. Now, there were a lot of aspects of filming on the water, too, that was pretty difficult. Just because it was time consuming and there was, logistical concerns about going from here to there. And there would be some times where it would be that we needed to go somewhere. We were doing something, we were traveling, we were transporting something, we were going to and fro, and there would be a storm kick up. And we'd be like, nope, this is where we're going to be for probably the next 5 to 6 days. We're just going to drop the anchor and this is where we're going to be. And they'd be like, can't we just go? Let's do the thing, and time is money, and film and all this. Would be like, nope, you're gonna get a lot of good shots of the mountains and the water because this is where we're gonna be. Because we're just not going anywhere until the storm passes. Because that's what you have to do when you live on the boats, and it's something that is just a daily occurrence, really, in Alaska, because the weather can shift just so fast. It can shift so fast. And then the hours put in as well, like the hours that you put into filming is something that people probably don't realize. That's another reality of reality television. It's a lot of hard work. And it's a lot of hard work for the people involved. Like the crew definitely put in a lot of hard work, a lot of hard hours, a lot of time, a lot of standing in the rain, soaking wet. While we did what we were doing, and yeah, we were soaking wet too, but it's our life. Like that's just how we lived. We hardly even noticed it was raining. I mean, you'll notice Gaby barely wore a shirt, right? Like we didn't notice a lot of it, but a lot of the crew would just be miserably uncomfortable, like a bunch of drowned rats, right? And they would still just be go-getters, standing with a smile on their face and just filming and running around and trying to keep up with us and our craziness. And they worked really hard. And there would be like, easily 12-hour days, 14-hour days, and they never stopped, hardly ever complained, nothing like that. So a lot of them were really go-getters. Like I've said before, some of them didn't make it very long. Some of them like jumped ship near immediately. They're like, just, this isn't for me. And then there were other ones that never really complained, seemed to actually really enjoy it. Like it's what they do, right? It's what they do. And then for us, long hours is just a way of life. Like we were just living our life and doing our thing. So for us to work from sun up to sundown, well, it was just what we were doing anyway. right? We were building a house. We were working on our boat. We were going from here to there. We were hauling boards up the beach. We were building things. We're busting wood and stacking it for winter and doing all that. And so there's just a lot of those things that you do all the time anyway. And some of it they were really fascinated by. And there's a lot of stuff that definitely didn't make it onto the show. Like for instance, here's a little bit of warning. I don't want to gross anybody out, but there is a way to tan hides naturally. And so we don't waste anything. Like if we hunt, when we kill a deer, we use all of it. We eat all of it. We eat the whole animal. We use every bit of it. And that, of course, includes the hide. And now most modern tanneries and people that tan hides, they use chemicals and they use components and things to tan the hides. But there is a natural way to do that where you just use the oil from the brain of the animal to tan the hide. And so I won't go into graphic detail, but I did a how-to showing the film crew how to do this and how to make that work. And they filmed the whole thing. And it was all done. I did it very well, and from beginning to end, over the course of however long it took me to do it, and that never made it onto TV. Apparently, that was a little too much. I guess it was a little too much, and so that didn't make it on. I thought it was incredibly interesting, and also something that is very important to know, in my opinion, because if you're actually in a survival situation like that where you need to make a buckskin, where you need to actually make the leather last, because that's something that isn't really covered a lot in like survival shows or in movies where you see people stranded and they take a bear skin and they make a bear skin coat out of it, because there are things you have to do to make that work. You can't just take a skin of an animal and wrap it around you and call it leather. That's not how it works. So there are things you have to do to tan the hide so that it lasts and it doesn't rot and it turns into leather and it turns into buckskin. And buckskin from a deer is very, very versatile. It is very strong. Buckskin from a deer is very strong. It is incredibly advantageous to be able to know how to make that in the wild and in a survival situation. And so that's why I wanted to teach people how to do it, and I included that in the show. And unfortunately, it didn't make it on though, as far as I know. As far as I know, that didn't make it. Now, another thing I was going to talk about last time that I didn't get to, because I talked a bit about bear safety and the bears and all that stuff. And so if y'all guys have seen the show, you already know that bears kind of broke into the house in Browntown, and they did it multiple times. Now, this happened because there was a window on the porch. Now, I told everybody, and I told Dad, who knew better, and I told everyone, don't put a window on the porch. See, the house was built far enough off the ground that even as big as the bears up there are, they couldn't get to the windows on the side of the house, right? They're not going to climb up the side of the house and bust in the window. So because they're lumbering around outside, and for the most part, unless they can see inside or have some reason or to think that there's something inside, then they're not even going to really realize there is an inside, right? To them, that house is just solid and they'll just go around it unless they like smell something inside, hear something inside, or can see inside, because they're not stupid, but they just don't readily think about, oh, that's a house. They don't recognize it as a thing, unless they know what it is, unless they've figured that out, unless they've come across it before, unless they're familiar with the idea of a house. Because then when they realize that, then they do recognize it, and they do know that there's stuff on the inside. But our house in Browntown, the house was built far enough off the ground that bears getting in through like the side windows was not an issue. It was not a problem. It was not something we had to worry about. But Mom and Dad, mostly Mom, wanted a porch window. They wanted a window on the porch so that they could look out the front of the house. And I was like, why do you need a window on the porch? We have windows on the side, we have windows on the back, you got a bunch of windows upstairs. You can see out of the house in all these different angles. Why put a window on the porch where we have stairs leading to the porch, and then there's the porch itself? And we know for a fact that bears can use stairs, and they're going to walk up those stairs, and they're going to look in the window, and they're going to realize there's an inside, and they're going to want to come inside. And while you're there, not as much of a problem, right? When we're running generators during the day or a little bit at night, and when you're running generators at night and a little bit during the day, and you're going around and you've established your area, like the bears realize that, okay, the Browns live here now, let's go around them. But then when you leave, then when you go somewhere, then when you take the boat to do a transport job, or you just want to go out fishing for a few days, or you're going to town to get your supplies and you decide not to come back that night, well, then the bears are going to get curious, because all of a sudden there's no noise. All of a sudden there's no lights. All of a sudden these human animals that have been living in this spot for so long and being so noisy aren't there. So for the first night, they might not come around. They might just be used to you and be like, oh, they'll be back. The second night, they're going to come around. They're going to look. They're going to check out the perimeter. And if they're like, oh, there doesn't appear to be anybody home, it gets all Goldilocks all of a sudden, except it's reversed because it's the bears, breaking in, and they're going to check it out. They're going to meander around. They're going to look at things. They're going to chew on things, and they're going to mosey on up your porch. And then that's what happened. So we had gone somewhere for a few days, and a bear, a rather large bear, moseyed up onto the porch. And a lot of this was caught on camera because we had trail cams and stuff like that you set out that are motion activated. And it filmed the bears lumbering up the porch. And the bear looks inside like he's Yogi the Bear. And then he kind of, presses his face on the glass. And then, one paw, pretty much all it takes, and then smash. And then he climbs inside because he's curious and he looks around. And that would have been bad enough. Lumbering bear, using the restroom in the corner because they're not toilet trained or housebroke. And then just, chewing on your stuff and walking around and sleeping in the bed, which one of them, yes, literally slept in one of the beds. You could tell it made the night there, that it made a little bed, a little nest in there, and it went to sleep. And the big issue, one of the big issues of the bear being inside, was that it stepped on a canned good. So again, you can't smell through a canned good, and it doesn't recognize that a canned good is food, because to it might as well be a rock or whatever. It doesn't equate to that being food. However, once it stepped on a canned good and food popped out, and then it started eating that food from the canned good, then it got the idea in its head, well, wait a second, I stepped on that and food came out. I wonder what else in here I can step on and food will come out. So the bear proceeded to step on everything. It stepped on everything. It went around squishing everything in the house. Everything in the house that it could get its hands on. It chewed on the kitchen cabinets. It clawed the walls. There were markings everywhere. It was pretty disgusting when we got back and had to clean all that up. And then the bears, of course, they come around that night because they're like, oh, the Browns left. These human animals are gone. It's our territory again. So, of course, they come right back the next night, even though there is noise at that point, because then they're just curious and they're like, oh, I need a snack. Let's go to the Browns. And then, of course, they show up and then they just leave, because, again, it's not like a horror movie. They don't want trouble. They just, they're living their life, and you have to respect the fact that they're living their life and you're in their world. We're all sharing the world together. We should all share the world with each other and with the animals and be able to coexist and realize that we're all sharing this wonderful, beautiful, crazy existence and just, live our lives and go about our day, which is what the bears did. And then they went about their day until we left again. And I, again, warned everyone in the family and told mom and dad, why don't we board up that window Why don't we cover that wall? Just build the wall out to get rid of the window space and just board it up. The bears are not going to be able to, break their way through the 2x2s and all of the boards that we're going to put up in the siding and everything else. They're not going to, tear their way through the wall. So just put the wall up and let's get rid of the silly porch window idea. But they were like, nope, let's put a new window in because we want to be able to see out the porch. This happened probably 4 times before they're like, okay, maybe we should get rid of the porch window, which was just hilarious. At this point, it just got to be kind of funny because it was hilarious. It was really funny. And actually, to show you how well it works when you don't have a window they can see in, I was actually living in the trapper shack that we originally built when we first got there. So we had what we called the MASH tent. It was like a military tent that most of us lived in. And then we had built a little trapper shack as well. And I say I because I way reinforced it and actually built it out on the inside more like a little room, and it was stout. It was built like a tiny little house. But it didn't have any windows, like you couldn't see in it. And so the bears, they would just lumber right past, and they would walk right past it, and they didn't really acknowledge it at all. Sometimes they'd like brush against the side, or they would like claw at it a little bit to say hello, but they didn't like try to get in there. And one fun thing I would like to do is at night, sometimes I would sit on the roof of the trapper shack because I built it out where it had a flat roof. I did away with the original roof. I built it out where it had a flat roof, and I put plywood on it and everything, really thick plywood. And I had a chair up top up there, and I would sit up there and I'd watch the bears at night, because even when they were skirting the area, there was still quite a few times where they would come in at night and they would check out the camp, or they would go sit by where we had the campfire, and they would just lumber around. And I would sit up there and just watch them and take pictures and stuff. I didn't have a good night vision camera at that time that I could really film with. But more than filming them, I just enjoyed sitting up there and communing with nature in that way and watching them. I guess to normal people, that would be a bit like diving with the sharks. It'd be like people that go into shark cages and stuff like that, because I was just on the roof of my trapper shack sitting there in my folding chair. Well, all these bears, meandered around, and I think 6 or 7 was the most I counted at one time that were there. Because there was one night, it was really bright. There was a really full moon. It was super bright, not a cloud in the sky. It was so pretty. It was really quiet. It was super clear and beautiful and smelled fantastic. It was just one of those magical nights. Like you could almost see the fairies darting between the trees. It was so magical. And then in come these bears lumbering. At first it was like 3 or 4 of them, and then it was like 6 or 7 of these gigantic grizzly bears, and a few smaller ones. There were a few young ones and a couple older ones. And it is sort of rare to see that many at one time, because bears are not they're not herd animals. Like typically you're only going to see a few in an area, or you're going to see a mother with her cubs, or you might see a couple mothers hanging out with their children, that kind of thing, because they're sort of social animals, but they're also kind of leery of each other a little bit. And so they're kind of solitary, but a little bit social, kind of like people. So it is a little unusual to see that many, but it was 6 or 7 bears that were just meandering around the camp and lumbering around. And it's really cool to watch an animal that is that majestic and magical in its environment, that is so devoid of the contamination of the outside world and of humans. And it is really cool to watch them in their element like that. And when they don't really realize like they're being watched, or didn't care that I was there. And it's really cool, because they're super, super cool creatures, the giant grizzly bear. They're really cool. They're super powerful. They're majestic. They're really smart. They're clever creatures. And they're just a really interesting animal. And it's different when you're like watching a documentary, or you're looking at photos, or you're reading about them in a book, than it is when you're sitting like 10 feet away from one and you're watching it walk around and watching it interact with its children and watching them have a little picnic over there by the tree and dig for grubs in the fallen log that's been sitting there decomposing. They're really cool. They're really cool animals, and that is something that I definitely miss about Alaska. You know, I miss the water and I miss the seafood and I miss the fresh water and the creeks and the rivers and the streams, and I definitely miss like the wild animals though, because there's something about being part of a world like that. There's something about being in a world that is still wild, being in a world that is still connected to that primal past that we all have. And I think that is something that everyone kind of longs for, whether they realize it or not. I think it's one reason why people gravitated towards and still gravitate towards a lifestyle like ours and our show, and why people responded the way that they did and have and still do to Alaskan Bush People, because there's something about that primal connection to nature and to that visceral, honest, hard, dangerous, free way of life. I think there's a draw to that. And even individuals that don't want to physically go do that, it's still very interesting and a little awe-inspiring maybe to watch individuals that are doing that and do live their life that way and want to live their life that way. Because it's something that has always just been the way that it is for us, because freedom is very important. Being able to live your life the way you want to, being able to do what you want to and say what you want to and think what you want to and dress the way that you want to. And like that's another thing, like dressing the way that you want to. A lot of people have the misconception that if you live in Alaska, that if you're a bush person, it means you're going to wear rain gear all the time and you're always going to be wearing rubber. And that's just not the case. Like, there are times to wear rain gear, but in your day-to-day, you're not going to wear it constantly. No bush person that really lives out there in the bush is constantly wearing rain gear. That's just not a thing. In fact, it's very common in the bush for people to wear leather jackets. Like, that's something that a lot of people tried to give us a hard time about, I guess. Like, I don't read a lot into any of those things, but so I've been told. It's a thing of people talking about like the leather jackets and stuff that we always wore. That is a bush way of dressing, right? Because I think a misconception with that is that in people's world, in what they call the real world, and don't get me started on that, because the real world exists beyond the horizon. The real world is not concrete and steel and glass. That's the fake world. It might be the world that has the most amount of people, but that's not the real world. The real world is forests and trees and rivers and the ocean, and it exists beyond the horizon. That's the real world. There are just less people living in the real world, so the majority of people call their world the real world, even though it's not. That's the man-made world. That's the fake world. That's the world that people have built. And if you have existed in that world, then you view things like leather jackets and such as decorative items. You look at it like a fashion statement, right? In our world, fashion is survival. In our world, the leather jacket is not a fashion statement. It's something that you wear because it lasts basically forever. If you take good care of it, you can pass it down to your children. A leather jacket will last a lifetime, a good one. And I'm not talking fake leather. I'm talking real leather. It's got to be real leather, or it's not going to have the durability that it needs to. It's not going to be tough and rugged and last. If you've got a real leather jacket and you've got a well-made leather jacket, it'll last you a lifetime, and it's going to protect you from the elements, from injuries. It's going to conform to your body. It's going to carry your body heat, and it's going to stay warm with you. Even if a leather jacket is soaking wet, it's still going to heat with your body heat, right? And it takes a lot to get a leather jacket soaking wet as well. Because if you use the traditional way of taking care of your leather and you put like mink oil on it, and boot polish is another one that works. If you boot polish and then mink oil your jacket, it'll shed water like a duck. And it takes a lot to get a jacket like that sopping wet. And leather jackets, they last, and they're way more comfortable than wearing rubber all the time. You don't want to wear rubber all the time. If you're going to be out there actually living that lifestyle and actually in the elements and actually existing in that world, it's much better to wear leather or to wear buckskin. There is a reason why that's what the mountain men wore. There's a reason why that is still a popular way of dress if you're somebody that exists in that world and lives that lifestyle. Like I said, there's a time and place and whatnot for wearing the rain gear and all of those things. But every day, no. And also, the rubber is uncomfortable. The rubber can rip, it can tear, it can break. It's extremely hard to repair rubber and rain gear. It's very easy to repair leather if it rips. All you need is good thread and the ability to sew. That's it. You can repair a leather jacket. I mean, I've made a lot of my leather jackets. I'm actually currently right now making a leather jacket because it's a story for a different time, but the leather jacket that I wore on the show for so long and that I really loved actually got stolen. Somebody broke into my truck and stole it. They bashed out the back window and stole it, which is ridiculous and crazy. And like I said, story for another time. But I'm actually myself right now making a new leather jacket because I couldn't find one that was what I wanted. And so I'm just putting one together. I'm sewing it myself. I've always been pretty handy with a needle. So it's very easy to repair a leather jacket if it rips. Kind of hard to repair, the rubber and whatnot, unless you have like the different professional like repair things. You can use some tent repair stuff to repair a lot of rain gear in a pinch, and sometimes just contact cement and stuff like that, and other pieces of rubber. But for the most part, it's just better to wear a leather jacket, and so that's why we've always opted for that, and that's why that is something that we have always used. It's something that a lot of bush people use is leather. And another argument for the leather, I dare you to go try to hunt in rain gear. Good luck taking your rain gear and going and finding a deer because it's noisy. It's very, very noisy. You can't take a windbreaker and you can't take rain gear on a hunt, not if you anticipate to ever see anything. Which actually brings me to another reality of reality television, which is try hunting with a film crew. Try hunting with a film crew. So, of course, they wanted to film us hunting. It was a major part of our life. I still go hunting every chance that I get. And in that life, it was a daily occurrence, practically. It was a major part of our life was hunting, as much as any other creature that exists in the forest, right? So, obviously, that was something that they wanted to document and be part of and to film. So, I'll never forget the first time that all these city slickers showed up to film a hunt, and they smell like cologne. They are wearing windbreakers and rain gear and those puffy jackets. So that right there is a no. You can't smell like cologne walking through the woods. And that does not mean that you have to not bathe and you need to smell all musty. No, you can bathe and you can clean up. And in fact, you want to, because you don't want to stink out there. Because if you do, if you got a bunch of BO coming off of you, you're not going to see anything either. Because they're going to smell that. Like deer are very, very hypersensitive to all this stuff because everything's hunting them. So you want to be clean. And the best thing that you can actually do is to be all cleaned up and have taken a fresh bath with a nice unscented soap. And you want to the best thing you can do is go down to the creek, take unscented soap, scrub up really good, get nice and clean, have your clothes clean, but again with like unscented soaps and things, and then go hunting. You don't want to wear rubber rain gear. You don't want to wear windbreakers and stuff like that. You want to wear, things that don't make noise. Like wool is good, leather is good, and broken in leather as well. Leather's much better once you break it in. People, again, that just wear it for fashion, like you wear it like 3 or 4 times, it's not going to be broken in. You have to like wear the leather for it to break in and not make noise and be something that is comfortable and that you can go hunting in and all that. So immediately that was a no-go. We had to basically like train the people in how they needed to behave for us to be able to go hunting. Also, they showed up and they're like, okay, we're going to take 3 camera guys and we're going to take the sound guy and we're going to take the technician. And then of course our safety guy needs to come and then you're going to go hunting. And we're like, that's way too many people. That's not going to work. You can't go hunting with 10 people that don't know what they're doing following you around the woods, because the first one that steps on a twig, no deer. I'm not going to see a deer that day. So initially it was just like, okay, well, here's what you do. The unscented soap and the cleaning up and the don't wear colognes and the don't wear, deodorants and don't show up wearing like windbreakers and puffy jackets and all this. You need to show up in wool and like get a sweater and, those kinds of things and show up. And so they're taking notes and everything, and they come back having checked off all these things we told them. And then it's like, okay, now at most, we're going to take a camera guy and the safety dude and maybe the sound person, right? Better to just like strap us up with the mics that have the batteries, so you don't need like a sound technician to make sure they're recording. Just hit record and let's go hunting. And that's how we did successful hunts on the show. Primarily just because they did what we told them to do. They lined it out the way that we were like, this is how it needs to work. And then I don't know if everybody had this problem, but I had a problem with they kept talking, which is a real issue when you're hunting. You cannot speak. It's one of the main things my dad taught me about hunting is your voice is death in the woods. Your voice will make it where nothing is going to be around, because you have to remember when you're in an area like that, like I said, the deer are very hypersensitive to everything. So they're going to be hyper observant, hyper aware of smells and sounds and everything that's going on. And if a deer is familiar with humans, then they are very much going to avoid the sound of a human voice. If a deer is unfamiliar with humans, they are very much going to avoid the sound of your voice, because it's going to freak them out. They're not going to know what it is. Right? So it's going to be a very unusual, very jarring thing. And a deer won't come back to that area for a very long time. Like, deer will stick to their routine, to their area. They're very much creatures of habit, but they will not return to a spot that they've been spooked for weeks. They may never return, but they might come back out of curiosity like a few weeks later. Very stupid or very brave deer will come back near immediately just to check it out and see what's going on. But vast majority, they're just going to be gone, and you're not going to see them again. So you can't talk. And that was a definite issue for me, because they, like the film people, they would just ask a question, or they would ask a question to each other, or they would say something under their breath or something like that. And it's like, hunt over. I guess we'll start again tomorrow. Unless we're going to try and trek 45 miles away from where we are and hope that the sound didn't carry on the wind. So you got to be very into what you're doing. And then that did help when you would get film people that were into it. When there were camera people that were like listening to everything you said, followed all the instructions, weren't talking constantly, actually wanted to get a deer, actually wanted to do the thing that you were doing, and weren't looking at it as a drudgery, right? Because there were a few times that they're like, okay, we're just going to stay out here until we get a deer, right? And I was like, yeah, that's the plan. So if you're coming with me, that's what you're signing up for. And that's how we did it. All right, guys, I guess I've been talking for a while now and going from one subject to another. I do appreciate y'all guys dropping in for the show. I've had a lot of fun doing the podcast so far, and it is something that I intend to continue doing. Because there's a lot of fun stuff and stories to tell of the past and things that have, transpired in our life, both with the television show and without, from way back and more recently and all those things. And I've got Bear lined up to do an episode with me soon. That's probably going to be like the next episode that airs is going to be with Bear. We'll see. No promises. But I do have an episode with Bear coming. And one of these days, I'm going to get more than one microphone. And I don't know how much I've talked about why I wanted to do the podcast and what really brought this on. But one of the reasons, and a big reason that I wanted to do it, besides the fact that I just always thought it would be cool to be a radio DJ. Up next, we got some Led Zeppelin coming at you fresh off the vinyl. That kind of thing. One of the reasons is because, my dad really inspired it. Because my dad... he said a lot of times that he really wished he had recorded all the conversations he had with his dad. and that he wished that he had recorded the conversations he had with his sister and his mom, and that how badly he wished he could listen to some of those conversations over again, and how cool that would have been. And unfortunately, I'm in the same position of wishing that I had Dad on the podcast, wishing that I could have had my old man sitting here on the podcast telling stories and talking about things. And even though I had wanted to do this for a while, it was not something I ever got to do with Dad. And I will forever regret that, and wish that I could. Dad's the person I would want to interview the most on the podcast. I'm very grateful that I've gotten to sit down with my mom a bunch and do a bunch of episodes with Mom. I think that's really cool. And I think it's awesome that in the future, like the future Browns will get to look back on the podcast and hear my mom telling stories, and hear my brothers and I talking about things and having conversations and telling stories and all this stuff. I think that's really cool. And it's like another aspect, another, reality of reality TV is the fact that all the future Browns will get to know my dad. They will get to know our family. They will get to know our world. And they will get to be a part of our life back then, and a part of Alaskan Bush People, the same way that y'all guys have been able to be. And I think that that's really cool. I think it's something that has definitely made all of it worthwhile, and something that my dad always said about the show. And it's another thing that I look at with the podcast is, if it brings a smile to one person's face, if it makes one person's day a little bit easier, a little bit brighter, if it makes just one person forget about their troubles, even for a moment, then it was all worth it. It was all worth it. And I agree with that. I think that was a great way, and is a great way, to look at things like this, and to look at that life of being in front of the curtain and putting your life out there like that. Because whether you're a movie star, whether you're an internet influencer, whatever it is that you do in front of the curtain, in the public eye, under the spotlight, if you bring a little bit of joy to somebody's life, if you make somebody's day a little bit brighter, even for a moment, it's worth it. It's worth it. All right, guys, I'm going to get going. I got a lot of stuff to do, and more episodes of the podcast to work on and plan out. So thank you very much for sitting down with me, guys, and listening to me ramble about anything, everything, and nothing all at the same time. Y'all guys, have a good one. Stay safe. Always respect the danger. And I will see y'all guys next time for another episode of Brown Overboard.